Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here. I'm going to speak about the business model of media. I think it's important for you to understand what is my vantage point. I'm a journalist as a training, and now I'm head of digital for a major media company in France, which is the main business use provider. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to turn around the company, and that's why most of my experience is at this time. So, two quick slides. As far as the media is concerned, and mostly the print press is concerned, here is what it looked like before the internet. Nice, comfortable, apparently indestructible sedan. And now, this is how it does look like right now. So basically, if I had to sum up my talk, it will be these two slides. Okay, more seriously, how did we end up here? First of all, we have a change in the way that news are consumed, news are read. I understand that the word consuming news does not appeal to everyone, so for lack of a better word, you have understood that you will have to endure my bad English. So, and the second thing is a kind of new definition of news. The whole concept of news has been totally revisited in the last year. Another important component is the failure of advertising. Basically, the digital advertising for news is a failure. It doesn't work. And lastly, media lost the technology battle. They did not invest enough. Question is, can good information survive the digital tsunami? I think the answer is yes. But there is some restriction, and we are going to have a look at it. The first one is the big change and the new relationship to news and how news has changed. Let's rewind the tape a little bit. The good old days for print publishing was roughly this one, but I could have used more recent newspaper, of course. At this time, we had one product, very pretty, straightforward, very simple. We had two reading times, morning and evening. Now it turns out the evening newspaper has mostly disappeared, but there is still plenty of morning newspaper as we speak. A straightforward leadership means that we are addressing one population which is clearly identified. This population doesn't have that much choice, and they read the newspaper we present to them, which is pretty simple. A top-down production, and that, as a journalist, is a very important thing, because one of the most disruptive force of the internet for a journalist is the feedback. I've been raised in a newsroom in which we were used to basically decide in the morning what will be good for the readers to read. And they fought back thanks to the internet, and I think it's a very good thing. It has taught a lot of good things to us. And a cozy competition. At the time, newspaper, media of all sorts were competing against each other. Now there is a different picture. News is consumed, is read on a PC, it's read on smartphone, it's read on tablet, it is read on e-readers. These platforms, these vectors, they do have their dedicated product, which is going to be a website, mobile site, application, closed application, open application, web app, or app by Apple and stuff. Encapsulated editions, digital editions, newsletter, all sorts of alerts and push notification, Twitter feeds, RSS feeds, Facebook page, LinkedIn, ebooks. We have a whole bunch of new applications for the news. And each of them are different business models. We have the free, which is ad supported. I will come back to that later. You have paid for per day, per copy, per article. You have all sorts of subscription, monthly, weekly. You have pass to pay for your content. You have flat fees. You have metered system like paywalls. You have payment in kind. Google is experimenting a very interesting way to have people paying without paying for news. I will come back to that later maybe. And you have sponsored sponsored post or sponsored tweet. You have lots of things. So there is also different prime time. If you take in the black drawing here is the web consumption from a different time frame, as well as mobile is. It slightly differ from a country to another, but sometimes it could be contracyclical. You will have different use at different time. If we take the basic pattern of the digital consumption of information, here is how it looks like. In the morning you will have newsletter, application, encapsulated editions, maybe sometimes ebook in the transportation. At work, you will have website. In the afternoon as well, you will have some website, but slightly less. At 6 p.m. in the evening, at least it's for a European, so you might give or take some stuff. But you will have, again, ebooks, and the evening you will have ebooks, website, video, tablet, and stuff. And if you take the vectors, the platforms, you will have a competition, permanent competition, a permanent overlap between platforms, e-readers, PCs, smartphone, e-readers, and tablets. And it's going to mix up all the time. So it makes things very complicated. And above all, you will have a permanent stream and a permanent access to Facebook, Twitter, and various kind of alerts. So that makes the environment extremely complicated to deal with. We have multiple audience. The audience has never been so fragmented. We have this audience using different devices with specific expectations for different moments of the day, and that makes us to think about, for instance, as a media publisher, should we have some kind of day part programming like television, means serving different content for at different hours on a specific device. I don't know if you realize the complexity we are in from the first slide with the single newspaper for a single public. Now we have to encompass this whole image. One thing about the free model, because unfortunately for the publisher I represent here, the internet is born with the idea that information should be free, which I don't think is the case. Let's look at some facts. A newspaper such as the New York Times spends $200 million per year for its newsroom. They maintain 1,200 reporters and writers of all sorts. And just to give you another example, when they are covering big war such as the Iran war, Iraq war, or the Afghan war, they spend something like $3 million per year. That's the cost of maintaining relatively safely a set of reporters, photographers, videographers, and stuff in a capital such as Baghdad or Kabul. They cover, for instance, they spend, for instance, $70 million to cover international news. News is an increasingly costly business. When you run a newsroom, you are spending money many times in dead ends. You must be in a position in which you will allow your reporters, your journalists to go, okay, you have a clue, we believe there is a story here, let's spend, you are free to spend days, weeks with your team and stuff, and it might be a dry hole. If we don't have such liberty, we won't have original reporting. That's a very important point. Of course, it depends what's your definition of news. Because news has changed drastically in the meantime. There is a big split of news, and basically the news has split in three parts. The first one I would identify is what I will call commodity news. It's the news which is ubiquitous, immediate, it's free, there is no economic value. We'll all get the same news at the same moment. Typically, it's going to be the Boston attack, for instance, which will show up on every media at the same time. This is the domain for portals, news portals such as Yahoo. This is going to be live blogging for various outlets. The second element is social news. In social news, it is basically the echo chamber. The notion of accuracy is completely secondary. The most important notion is reverberation. Of course, that's the kingdom of Twitter, Facebook, or stuff like Reddit, with all the things we have seen recently, especially in the Boston case, in which the wrong people has been singled out on Reddit. And the third one is what I will call the quality niche. It's basically for the elderly, rich, educated people. It's a very small market, but those people have the advantage of acknowledging the value of original reporting, and that's for newspaper, magazine sites and stuff. And most of them are doing a fairly small audience. Of course, there is some exception. We'll see that later. So for a news company, we are facing kind of dilemma now, which is, should we go? Should we look for large audience or qualified audience? There is audience-driven site. They are built for clicks. They are aiming at large audience, but they don't have any loyalty. Their CPMs, the revenue is extremely low. They are enabled, since they don't have any loyalty, to actually gather subscribers. And they are highly vulnerable in terms of economic economic condition. On the other end of the spectrum, you will have qualification-driven website. They are less dependent on traffic, smaller audience, but they do have higher loyalty. CPM is much higher, and they have a better monetization because they can diversify the source of their monetization through advertising, targeted advertising, high quality advertising, and subscription. And they are they don't have the same sensitivity to the economic condition. They are much more resilient. If I draw a little picture, you will have here, let me use the clicker. So you will have, there is an exception, which is the New York Times. The New York Times and some of this newspaper, some of this kind, they will have a large audience, and they will have a fairly high revenue per user, but that's mostly the exception. Most of them are in this category. Curiously enough, The Guardian, which is an excellent newspaper online, they gather a fairly small amount of money. They have something like 60 million unique viewers per month, and they only collect something like $50 million per year, which is fairly small if you compare to the New York Times, for instance. Means that their ARPU, their average revenue per user, is extremely small. But there is worse, of course. You have publications such as Salon or Slate, which are great from a journalistic perspective. They don't bring money, they don't bring audience, and they are struggling, and they have been struggling for years. And of course, there is some specialized publication, such as the Financial Times or The Economist, which is, by the way, the same group, more or less. And they command relatively small audience, relatively speaking, but they will have a higher ARPU. So let's go to the advertising thing. Basically, like I said, advertising is not working, and there is 4 reasons for that. First one is bad creativity. Basically, the creativity on the advertising sucks. Another thing is the endless supply, a huge inventory. Another thing is unreliable analytics. And the fourth element is crude buying practice. Let's have a look, and I'm going to have a drink in the meantime. That was for the first rogue wave, by the way, because there is other wave coming. Creativity, this is just an example of a fairly good website, .com. It's about women, of course, but look at that. The site has been entirely bought by Garnier, which is a beauty kind of a product outlet, and they entirely own the visual of the site, and it's more frequent than it's appear. And the identity of the site has been completely diluted. That's a kind of extreme example, but it just shows you how far the advertising community is ready to go. Because of the advertising visually doesn't work very much, many online newspapers are looking for what I call the Zen option. If you take the New York Times, which is the current version of the New York Times at this time, I took the dining and wine section on the web. It's a bit confusing, especially if you look at the broad page. You have advertising almost everywhere. And look at the new version. The new version is really different. And if I take side by side the different pages, the actual one, and the future one, which is going to be online, I guess, before the end of this year, is totally different. And Le Monde, for instance, is doing the same. When you take Le Monde, which is roughly the equivalent of the news of the New York Times, at least they see themselves that way, because I don't think there is an equivalent to the New York Times. Le Monde, for instance, they have clearly two zones in their offerings. You have a free. When you access the newspaper for free, you will have pages loaded with advertising, loaded with a lot of stuff. And if you happen to be a subscriber, you will have a completely different site. And if you click on a button which is called Zen, it will show article with just the bare minimum. You won't have anything else. So there is clearly an issue of a UI issue in that respect. Reason number 2 is endless supply. Each day, millions of new URLs are created by media company. My own newspaper, Les Echos, is creating something like 300 to 400 new URLs per day. The New York Times, once again, is creating more than 1,000 of URLs per day, and these URLs are competing for the same eyeball, but they are competing for the same marketplace. So we are in this absurd system in which we are creating an endless supply of content. That's totally the contrary of television, for instance. Television, at least on the French market, you basically have 300 slots per day. It's limited every day, whatever the demand is. So the price are functioning in the demand and supply system, and they are able to maintain a fairly high price. So the concept of endless inventory is an extraordinarily powerful deflation engine. The result is CPM basically fell by 30% in roughly 4 years. You have to keep in mind that in France, major newspaper, high quality newspaper are selling as a CPM for something like €6, and it used to be 10 or 12 euros a couple of years ago. And my own newspaper is selling for 10 on average. It's because it's a specialized newspaper. Plus, marketers, since they don't trust the performance of the advertising, they are asking now for proof of performances. So, this reason number 3 is very inadequate measurement techniques. The paradox is just amazing. The internet is born with all possible measurement on a native way. Logs and stuff, you know that better than I do. Still, we are stuck with horrendous panels, such as this one. Nielsen is probably the worst, because Nielsen is the de facto standard for advertising. And guess what? How Nielsen was able to be the de facto standard for advertising? That's very simple. And Nielsen people who are extremely clever, and I must acknowledge that they are doing their best in order to correct the flaws in their system. But they basically go to advertising agency, media buying companies, and they say, look, we have been measuring television for quite a while, and measuring the internet is just going to be a piece of cake. You will have the same instrument, the same interface and stuff, so let's go for it. So the whole industry, the whole advertising industry is now relying on such kind of panels. The reason number 4 is what I call the Ken and Barbie syndrome. He's the buyer, she's the seller, or it could be the other way around. Basically, they are commanding the worst possible transactional practice ever. They are not trained. They completely ignore all the data we, publisher, try to give them. Means we are making lots of analysis about our sites, who is watching our news, and so on and so forth, and they only buy the bulk, only nothing but volume and discounts. So there is some hard figures coming to that. If we take these 2 newspapers, for instance, and if I could apply some kind of very gross scale, the revenue between the print edition and the online edition would be roughly that way, with this incredible figure. For $1 gained in digital advertising, newspaper and magazine have lost $16 on print ad. Try to build a business model with that. That's an amazing data. Look at this curve. You have the newspaper advertising revenue in million of current 2012 dollars, and here you have major plunging, and we are basically at the same level than we were in the 50s. And online, in red, is not changing that much. So we are facing a real problem here. But there is more. Remember the Ken and Barbie. Okay, so the good news is they will soon be replaced by machines. Okay, but is it really a good news? What we call programmatic buying, real-time bidding, etc., or ad networks, automated transaction platforms, they all started with good intention. The idea was actually to sell remnant inventories by the bulk at a very inexpensive price and being able to retarget this advertising to the right people. The problem is now they were used to sell, if you have a page of the web page, they were used to sell the bottom of the advertising. Now they are pushing up, and there is a great deal of premium spaces which are actually sold now on a real time bidding system. It's totally out of control. In 2012, our TV represented 13%. Now it's in 2016, it will be about 30%, which is, in my view, the rope we will be hanged with. Seems the CPM are down to a fraction of a dollar or a fraction of a euro. We are facing a massive deflation stuff. By the way, people at the New York Times feel the same. This guy, Mark Franz, who is one of the head of digital up there, he said that ad networks have led in a shift in ad dollars away from classic display ads toward real-time purchase that are driving down rates and disintermediating news publisher. And speaking of news publisher, the guy knows quite a bit. Here is an interesting map. This is basically all the partners we are facing when we are selling digital advertising for a media. And you can, I don't know if you can see that, but they are all here. You have the agencies, the remaining advertising agency. You have the media buying platform. They basically decide what kind of, when a product is issued, who is going to, what media are going to be purchased. You have the DSP, the demand side platform. You have the ad exchange. You have the horizontal ad networks. You have the vertical ad networks. You have people who are targeting, companies who are targeting audience. You have companies which are monitoring performance. You have companies which are specialized in mobile stuff. And you have the whole data company, including especially Facebook, which is a heavy data provider. You have data optimization company. They are all here. So this is most of them are bottom feeders, which raise a serious problem for our economy. Well, like if it was not enough, there is another wave, which is the mobile. Mobile is fine because everybody is flocking to watch news on mobile. problem is, roughly, we have now many news sites, they have 30 to 50% of their traffic coming from mobile, but it generates 5% at most of the advertising revenue. The real figures will be more like 3%. 30 to 50%, 3 to 5% in terms of revenue. Just give you an idea on yes.
Why is it so bad? Is it there's not the real estate available for the ads on the phone, or everybody puts their thumb at the bottom edge to block out the ads, or?
Oh, it's basically people don't like advertising on mobile. Point number one. Point number two, the creation is just ugly. I mean, the stuff I showed on the web page, I mean, on a mobile device is much worse. It's much more intrusive, especially since on the mobile stuff, you're going to read your stuff in the public transportation system in a kind of urgency where your attention is not at its best, and trying to capture the attentions of the people's attention with advertising is quite challenging. And the thing is, we are also facing a drop in the CPM, because when we are 3 to 6 or maybe 10 sometime on the web, we might be below 1 on mobile. And there is a sign that even Apple failed on the mobile advertising with its iAd program. Look at this interesting chart. It's for the French market, but I take it the same for the American market. Of course, the advertising revenue coming from mobile is growing fairly well. It's growing 6 times better in France than the web advertising revenue are doing. But the audience is growing twice faster when you count in visits, and 3 times faster when you count in page views. It means that each people who is flocking on the mobile for us brings structurally less and less money over time, which is really a serious problem. Okay, to sum up, sorry? Sure.
Why do you, it would be convenient if you got the same revenue per user, in the sense of
yeah, sure,
it
would be great.
But it doesn't cost you any more to set things up, right? It's all automated.
Yeah, but except that you have a clear shift in terms of audience, that now the audience is transferring itself to the mobile. I mean that the audience is transferring, is going to a platform in which we make less money, and it doesn't, regardless of the price of serving a page on mobile, we are making less money per user on a mobile, much less money per user on a mobile than we do on the regular web.
So the problem is not that you're making less money per user. It's while you're getting more users, it's that the users are transferring from the web to the mobile.
It's both, actually, because in an ideal world we would like to be able to make the same amount of money on both platforms. That's why we are. I will come back to that later, but we need to rethink the advertising basically in all platforms available. So a good campaign, and I'm anticipating a little bit, but the most successful news digital media company, such as the New York Times, for instance, they are selling campaigns on all platforms, print, but also at the same time web, mobile, tablet. And the best idea is actually to go up in the food chain and to be able to conceive campaigns which will be able to take advantage of of each platform. That's the plan. Because otherwise, if we are in a kind of one size fits all, we might have a very lousy system. Dennis?
Yeah, you're suggesting that the susceptibility of a user to advertising is growing less and less, particularly in the mobile area.
Oh no! I'm suggesting. I'm not suggesting that. You mean the susceptibility? I mean,
yeah.
Users don't like advertising on mobile.
That's right.
They reject that.
And they don't pay any attention to it by not clicking through. And that's
Yeah, that's an
That's
issue.
danger.
And when we do surveys, they send back an image. Their feedback is extremely negative.
But I think your data probably is not as, it doesn't show things as bad as it really is, because the mobiles of the past were very tiny screens. These are fairly large screen computers with lots of capability and multicolor ads. So you would think that they would catch people's attention, but they don't.
It catches people's attention, but when we do survey, they basically rejected it. I mean, they don't like it, and the advertising agency, the media buying agency, knows that, and they tend to lower the price on mobiles, and basically it doesn't work.
I think your equation on the bottom doesn't quite capture the story. You're really talking about the total revenue is going down as the shift moves to mobile. It's not per user, it's the fact the total difference.
Yes, the total.
When 30% move over to mobile and you only get 5% revenue of that, that's the total
Yeah.
that goes down.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter whether it's per user or not.
Well, actually, it does matter a little bit, because I think one of the shift we are facing in the media company is actually introducing the notion of ARPU. Means that we are going to, instead of thinking in terms of silos, that I have a daily, I have a magazine, I have a radio station, I have a mobiles app, I have web apps and stuff. The idea is actually to measure what brings a user which has been somewhat in contact with our news content. So that's why we are looking at the picture. But you're right, yeah.
Keep going, I want to know.
Sir?
Can I ask? So is the lower CPM on mobile because of lower click-through rate on mobile phone or some other reason?
I say lower CPM on mobile, basically because the entity who is actually fixing the price on mobile are the media buying agencies. And when media buying agencies decided that, based on surveys, based on analytics, based on various performance indicators, that it doesn't work, they push the price further down. So that's an issue. Sure.
Isn't that also because you have, well, it's supply and demand, you have less advertisers wanting to buy mobile because they don't trust that, but also this also includes all the mobile ads that go into games and all these other things.
I'm talking about news. No, you're right. I'm talking about news only. Okay. Okay, to sum up, basically, we have a changing notion of news, we have segmented audience, we have multiple vectors to access the news, and we have an extremely difficult business environment with kind of durable deflationary mechanism at work, and which translate into a huge value destruction. Okay, now where do we go from here? That's what I say, turning around the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs, the price, basically. As we mentioned, you get it, advertising won't be able to sustain quality information. But first of all, personally, I'm not anti-advertising. I don't want to judge, but I'm against the concept of advertising, which is not the case. I think the model of advertising on digital is flawed, that's it. But I think it could bring some serious cash if some conditions are met. The first one is we, publishers, we need to recreate some kind of notion of scarcity. I've been writing for quite a while in the Monday Note that publishers have been totally wrong by keeping their entire inventory available for sale. At my newspaper, Les Echos, at the last count, we have something like 2 million pages, potentially, which are available for sale, which is totally ridiculous. Of course, it's a kind of long tail mechanism, but still, it's totally ridiculous. So my belief is that publishers should consider closing down a significant amount of their inventory. When I say a significant amount, it should go as high as 50%, 30 to 50% I take. Recreating scarcity. The second idea is better analytics. My personal recommendation to my own company, and it does not reflect the management of a position of my company, but that's my suggestion and recommendation, is actually to get out from the Nielsen kind of stuff, to get out for such kind of flawed panel. We need to create some ad hoc studies, ad hoc survey in order to see exactly what is going on our website. And we can do that in a very precise manner, in a very fair manner. Just to give you an idea, in France, the Nielsen panel has 25,000 panelists, people who actually have a box on their computer which recorded every move. It doesn't work on mobile, or it worked differently on mobile. On mobile, it did not encompass tablets, for instance, or iPhone and stuff. So the stuff is completely flawed. And out of the 25,000, there is only 3,000 panelists which are at work. Means my newspaper, which is a business newspaper that people use mostly at work, is basically counted on 3,000 people. And I recall that France has 65 million people. It's a fairly big country. So the model doesn't work. So I think we should do something about it. The third point is basically terminating most of the bottom feeders I just described earlier. Of course, there is plenty of highly competent intermediaries which are doing a great job at analyzing our market and stuff, but you have a great deal of them which are plainly useless. And the fourth point is media should move up in the value chain as far as advertising is concerned. A year ago, I went to the New York Times and I discovered that at their advertising department, they have a whole bunch of people with great technical skills. They are basically taking back all the technologies, interactive technologies which are developed for the newsroom, for the animation, for the 3D stuff, and they repurpose that for the advertising market, and they actually somewhat compete against Madison Avenue by going to the advertiser and saying, guys, we can propose you such and such and such for your brand. Here is some kind of prototypes, here is some kind of stuff. As long as we will not be able to move up in the value chain, we might have some issues. Just quickly, 5 more leads. The first one is focus, another one is data, platforms, and technology, and corporate reinvention. Very quickly. The first one is we need to keep focusing on our core asset. On the early days of the internet, on the publishing internet, everybody was considering that Google might buy the New York Times, Yahoo might enter the news sector, and so on and so forth. It did not happen. Not because these people were not clever, they are quite clever, not because they did not have the financial means to do so, but it's a totally different business. So they won't enter in this business. We should keep raising the barrier to entry, making things difficult to imitate, focusing on our original core qualities, which is original reporting, analysis, exclusivity, and uniqueness. These are the key words for success, for actually survival. The best franchise, of course, will find their way. Two quick examples. The New York Times, with their paywall, they took a while because they took something like 18 months to develop their paywall, but it was excellently executed. They now have 700,000 digital subscribers. They rise about almost 50% for a quarter to another. And as far as the Financial Times is concerned, which is our model for my own company, they now have more than 300,000 subscribers, and they outpace the print circulation. And they are extracting a great deal amount of money. Sir?
If I buy the New York Times here on a Sunday, it costs me $6. If I want to subscribe to New York Times only digital, it's $8. If I get the bundle of Sunday edition plus all digital access, it costs me $4.
Yeah.
Is this really a sustainable business model?
Well, that's
And you
interesting.
told me something about digital subscribers.
Yeah.
They, especially the New York Times, they've got these New York Times lovers that are willing to pay a high price for their paper copy. But if they do their math, they have to turn to be digital subscribers because it's so much cheaper. Is that really?
Yeah, it's cheaper than the paper, but I think the average revenue for each subscriber for the New York Times is in the neighborhood of $12 per month. Because people like you, I mean, there is people who are actually taking the weekend issue, the Sunday issue, just to have access to the digital subscription, which is the best deal, which is below $12, I think. But on an average, I mean, the New York Times has been able to add up something like $90 million per year, which did not exist a couple of years before. So, yes, I think it's a sustainable model, but it has to gain traction. And plus, the paywall of the New York Times is remain extremely permissive. It's a membrane. When you come, as you know, when you come from a social network, when you come from a search engine, it does not decrement the 15 stories you get for free, which is not the case for the Financial Times. And I have actually another example, which is a tiny example. It's in Switzerland, a newspaper called Le Temps. They decided overnight to go for a paywall, but they did so in the harshest way possible. No access whatsoever as long as you are not registered. Very few amount of stories available, and they sustain a drop of something like 30% in their digital circulation, but they regain this circulation something like 6 to 9 months afterwards. So, I mean, the whole paywall stuff and digital subscription stuff works as long as there is some quality. The other thing is data, and that's what we are working on quite a lot at my newspaper. Think about, best analogy is a passport. A 10,000 pages passport, but we don't issue and we don't collect the first page, which contain the name and the address and so forth of the person. We just assign them an ID number instead. The first phase is on the first visit we drop a cookie. Basically we issue a passport. On each visit of the site we follow the path, the pattern of usage of the people, what kind of story he or she sees and so on. And we record that and we stamp that. That's the stamp of the and we feed a profile. And this profile is matched on thousands of profiles, which will help us to define exactly who is going to our website. We believe that we are working with a French company called Esacus, which is based in Bordeaux. It's a company filled with mathematicians, scientists, and linguists, semiologists and stuff. And we believe that in a matter of 18 months or maybe 2 years, we will have dozens of profiles, and we will be able to detect with a remarkable certainty exactly who is coming to our site. If it is someone working in the industry, in the field of marketing, he or she, by the way, living in a suburb area, which city and so on and so forth, we will be able to collect all of this data, and after that we will be able to serve these people with targeted advertising in a much more efficient way and less intrusive way than the companies which are doing that at the moment. We will be able to serve them some recommendation engine, editorial recommendation. So we are going to plug the profile stuff on our recommendation. Means that someone who is going to read an article about, I don't know, aerospace, if this person has a marketing background, or if this person has, for example, a legal background, we might be able to push this person a different story related to the subject. So the idea is to actually increase the rate of circulation on the website. We might be able to sell upselling product. Let's say, for example, that we have conference for accountants or CFOs, because my media group is doing something like 200 events, paid for events per year. We might be able to, once we acknowledge the person, he is a CFO, we are going to tell him, okay, there is in 3 weeks, you can register for 50% discount at this conference on financial accounting and stuff. We might be able to optimize our paywall performance, which is a fairly complicated stuff. Paywall, you build that over a 3-year period, and we just started in last October. And at some point, we will identify the person by his name or her name, simply because this person will register herself, and we will be able to connect the person to our CRM, and we might be able also, if the person connects itself through Facebook or Twitter, we might be able, thanks to an API system, we might be able to have more data about this person. So basically, like I say, the idea is to raise the ARPU. Miss?
Can you just talk a little bit more about how you assign the ID at the beginning? Is that through the user registers for your site?
No. We drop a cookie,
Okay.
and this cookie will have just an idea, and this ID will be in a database, and the database and the name, the number of the person will be fed with all its usage pattern. It will be matched against a model, a statistical model, and we will be able to determine the profile of the person.
So anybody who comes to the site, they don't have to
Yeah.
register, they have to come in through Facebook?
No, they don't have to register at this time.
They just touch the
But
site.
we are going to warn them, because we have, in France, we have a body which is actually looking for the privacy issues, and we are going to warn them that we are actually using cookie. Dennis?
So do you take and try to create a profile of the individual machine?
Absolutely. No, the person. We don't care
Right.
about the machine.
Yeah, but you're binding IDs to machines, not to information that you're acquiring from the person. So the IP address isn't adequate. So you look at the browser and look at characteristics of the browser and any other piece of information you have to try to isolate each individual user. Is that correct?
Yeah, mostly, yeah. Sir?
Small cookies.
How were you able to convince a traditional medium like newspaper to take on such a challenge? Because these are very foreign concepts to traditional publishing.
Oh yeah, well, that's a full-time job. Tell me about it.
I know.
That's my job, and I'm losing my hairs. So it's very complicated, because one of the things is, I will come back to that later, but media are quite adverse to technology. They did not invest in technology. Most of them have a kind of suspicious approach to technology, and it's really a hard time to actually convince them. But I'm very lucky, because in my company we have an executive team that understood from the outset the importance of investing in technology, investing in such technology. Sir?
Roughly what percent of New York Times, for example, of revenue comes from advertising? In other words, you can raise APU by 10% by raising prices 10%.
Yeah, actually, well, I think they rose the price, the price of the copy, the price of the physical newspaper. Newspapers such as the New York Times is a pretty expensive newspaper.
But print's expensive. What I've read is they're not making any money on the print. They're actually losing money on the
Yeah,
print.
they are
And
losing
the paper
money.
itself costs them more, and
Yeah,
distribution costs
$2.50,
more.
yeah.
So why not just get rid of the paper completely, as the
Oh,
Christian
that's an
Science
interesting
Monitor
question.
has done?
Yeah.
Get rid of advertising and just raise the APU and provide a quality product.
Yeah, it pertains to the importance of paper, because the paper, especially for the advertising community, gives some kind of status. I mean that you won't be able to perform as good as the New York Times is doing without the paper. That's point number one. Point number two, you will always have a substrate of base of people who might be willing to pay for the paper at almost any price. So
That's why they bundle actually the Sunday
Yeah.
edition with the online edition, so that they can keep up the illusion of many people reading the Sunday edition on a Sunday to make a lot of money on the paper advertising.
Yeah, there is another reason to that is they basically make, grossly speaking, half of their advertising revenue on Sunday. So, I mean, that's a specificity of the American market. We don't have such kind of stuff in France, unfortunately. Dennis?
A while back, we had a group from Narrative Science in Chicago,
Yeah.
which basically described a system which took data and wrote articles and did a pretty good job of it. And of course, the particular data that could be used would be the news article information plus information about your profile, so that articles which you would approve of could be generated, and that would improve the acceptance of those articles by you, and make the CRM for ads perhaps somewhat better. Is this something that you're going for?
Well, I hope not, because I think my job is difficult enough with writing people ourselves. So I don't think it might be a possibility. But you know, I mean, recent experience have shown that content farms and stuff like that has not performed very well, and well, it's totally contrary to the idea of assigning value to the news by original reporting, original analysis, and stuff. Sir?
Since more and more content is consumed through apps, how does this shift to the app world jeopardize your effort to collect data?
Oh, that's an interesting question. It pertains to our strategy. We tend to believe that apps is kind of transitional for us, for the media, because technically speaking, we don't need that much apps, because apps is wonderful when you need powerful rendering engines for games, for graphics intensive application and stuff, which is not the case for media. That's why we would like very much to develop web apps, because web apps you can drop cookies, you can profile your people and so on. It's not closed gated stuff, unlike apps. So we are going to roll out a set of apps next month, but we are going to roll out a first beta version of web apps, because we want to learn web apps in order to ensure a proper transition from apps to web apps. It might take a while, but we might end up there. Sir?
So, news has changed.
Mm-hmm.
When there was just print, you had two opportunities a day to find out what happened. When television came on, you suddenly had the breaking news thing. Now you've got a mobile device, and you can get the sensation, the immediacy happening. So news is now the sensation of what's happening now, which everybody needs to know because it's just this human instinct, and the analysis, which is why it happened, what's going on behind it, what's the background, which is why you typically go to magazines. You go to the deeper thing. Which so two questions. Have you considered crowdsourcing the sensation aspect? Because there's lots of Twitter feeds and stuff like that. And, why pay reporters to be in the field when you've got 1,000 readers?
It's a matter of reliability, I think.
Well, okay. Crowdsourcing seems like one angle you're not talking about. The second one is, have you thought about flow through? Have you thought about letting the advertisers pay the consumers? Why do you keep all the advertising money and not let your readers get a little chunk of that? To build loyalty to your brand, to say,
Because it has yet to invent. I mean, it might be an interesting path, but it might be a bit complicated, I'm afraid. But I understand your point. Yeah, that should be.
You're trying to fund the analysis.
Yeah.
Right. You can't. You're not going to win against the sensation stuff. Twitter.
Yeah, we might win, because at some point, I mean, the whole history of the press is that you have high audience stories which are subsidizing low audience stuff, which is necessary to have. For example, I mean,
That's the old model.
yeah, but we need to keep on that because we need to report on complicated things. When we report about the EU, for example, the European community issues, which are extremely important for a country like France, it is high and sexy as you can imagine, of course, compared to a people story, compared to kind of sensational story. But we need to bundle the whole two in order to be able to produce the EU story, which is very important. So I need to go a little bit faster. So just please.
Yeah, but as Craigslist demonstrated, you cannot maintain a bundle. Craigslist took away all the advertising revenue.
Yeah, it costs publishers quite a bit. So
so the bundle can't. If you're relying on the bundle, that's dead. It's going to die. TMZ is going to beat you to Michael Jackson.
yeah, but if we unbundle the stuff, we will die anyway. So we prefer to keep the bundle. I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Just to go back to your cookies, is this strategy the same one that is being used by online retailers, the big Amazon?
Probably
Best
yes.
Buy?
Yeah. Actually, they are light years away from us in many ways. Yes. If you take, for example, the relevancy of the recommendation engine by Amazon, I mean, we are decades behind that.
Okay, so is your strategy similar to them? That's what you're doing?
In that field, maybe. I don't know exactly. I'm not familiar with the profiling that Amazon is doing. Sir?
Try my question more directly. Can the newspaper business survive without advertising? Do you have to have an advertising model?
Depends on the size and it says of the
Can the New York
scope of the
Times
operation.
survive without advertising?
No, the New York Times won't be able to survive without
Would not.
advertising.
The
No, they
company
won't.
would not survive.
No, I mean, considering the size of the New York Times, considering the fact that they have 1,200 journalists and it costs them 200 million per year to produce their stuff, just to produce the news, they won't be able to considering the fact that the digital subscribers brings only less than $100 million, they would need advertising. I need to move a little bit. I will try to go fast. The thing is, what we consider is we need to shift from a notion of publications, vertical publication, to a notion of platform. These people, guys, here, we consider them as aggregators. Basically, the audience is there, and we need to attack them through APIs. We need to attack them through social. And this is the application and web apps we are having currently at Leseco. We need to serve them with different mode, different vectors that will fit their need and preferences. We will have websites, mobile sites, web apps, native apps, and all of them will be interconnected. That's the idea. The fourth point is understanding technology. We are basically in a business in which now it's necessary to invest and to master data, search, web optimization, in order to have fast content generation to some extent, maybe not to the extent of narrative science, but application, web application. It's a technology-driven business. Very few people understand that. Actually, the New York Times did understand that, and several in the United States does. So, unfortunately, we left this field to others. If you consider this application, none of them has been invented by a publisher, to the point that some of them are buying. Zeit has been purchased by CNN. Pulse has been purchased not by a media company, but by a social network, which makes LinkedIn a competitor to our business. We need to reinvent the corporate media. Louis Dworkin, the chief produce officer for Forbes, mentioned that two things important to me. He put his company on a start mode, completely different approach, and he considered that his competitors are much broader than the other publisher, and I think he's totally right. By the way, the digital revenue for Forbes accounts for 50% of the total, and they have a growth of almost 20% on a year-to-year basis. So, big overhaul is required. This was the first version of the multimedia reporter. I'm a bit severe because we have changed a bit, and media companies are quite modern now. But we need more linear organization, less centralized organization, more agile, more tolerance for failed experiment. Means that this is a thing I learn by writing and talking to tech people, is that they do have this test and learn approach. They encourage failure to some point. They are not deterred by failure, by the perspective of failure. We need more technical people able to understand all of the intrication of our business. Basically, we need less memo and more proto. That's very important stuff. And in the end, we need to call this guy Charles Darwin in order to preserve the idea of this man, because in the end, it's a matter of democracy. Thank you. Sir?
I wanted to talk to you about the difference between, you have New York Times, you use a lot of New York Times in your publications, it's more of a national publication, and the difference between that and your local newspaper, because, I mean, the New York Times can draw on their audience is basically the English-speaking world, and China too, they have a Chinese version, you know, so they can get 1 million, you know, almost 1 million paid subscribers, whereas if you're in a town of only 1 million people, and you try to get enough to boost that up, you're not going to get there.
Well, I would say it depends on your value proposition. If you are able to tell your readers in your town that what you are proposing them in terms of news coverage is absolutely unique, and they won't find anything else elsewhere. If you are not in the commodity news, if you are in the value-added news, you might have a way to have these people paid for. And actually, there is plenty of example of American newspaper who are extremely harsh, extremely severe in their approach to paywall. I mean, the numbers are small, but people have no choice but paying online, and for some of them it works. But of course, it works better for large organization. But and you're right in the sense that the English language help quite a bit. The New York Times, they have something like 40 million UVs per month, 30 million UVs domestically. So we are in the business in which the winners takes all. The biggest you are, the more chance you have to. Lady, I think you have a question.
Yeah, I had a question about print advertising. So when cable TV first entered and increased the supply of ad slots, broadcast, and also drew away viewers from broadcast TV, ad rates went down for broadcast because fewer viewers. But eventually the ad rates rebounded because even though the total amount of people watching a broadcast show went down in absolute terms, it was still a huge market. It was still like sort of the easiest way to reach 14 million viewers. So I guess I'm wondering if you get the sense that print advertising might also sort of enjoy that same kind of rebound where you might have fewer people overall looking at newspapers in the printed form, but it's still the only place you could have a huge ad or reach that large of an audience.
Well, actually, there is another mechanism I did not mention about the demise of advertising, which is the time spent on various media. When you compare the time spent on the web versus the time spent on print, you will see that the time spent on the web is much bigger, but the allocation, the ad spending, what brands are spending on it, is much smaller, which is totally the contrary on the print. Print, small viewership in terms of time allocation, but high spending. So the mechanism will offset the stuff, and it's a mechanism which is going to actually withdraw some investment for the print. So mechanically, the print advertising is about to dry up furthermore. I don't know if it does answer your question, maybe. I hope so.
So it's not going to have the same experience?
No, I don't think so. No.
TV.
Plus the competition for advertising is so huge now that it's no longer a zero-sum game. Sir?
You talk about building essentially a user model over time with people. Why aren't you, so when I come to your site for the first time, you know nothing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Whereas the ad networks have inverted that in some sense. No matter where I go, the ad network knows what to do for me.
Yeah.
So why aren't you letting them provide you the personalization? So the first time I show up, it's completely personalized for me.
Oh, it's simply because they sell. We try not selling them premium advertising space.
Why not buy from them personalization that you're trying to build?
Oh yeah,
they're better at it than you are.
I mean, yeah, actually that's a good question, because you have a growing number of companies which are going to create some kind of marketplace for data. So we might be able to buy profile at some point. But actually we believe it's much more valuable to build our own profile. Because we are actually, our view is that, just to give you very basic ideas, my newspaper, Les Echos, they do have currently 4 million UVs counted by Nielsen, which is more or less bullshit, but never mind. 4 million UVs. The largest newspaper in France, they are in the neighborhood of 11 million. The target group we are aiming at in France is a little bit than 5 million people. They are people which are interesting for us for many reasons. Business manager, executives, students and stuff. So we have a chunk of kind of limited target group. And if we want to pursue a race to have 10 million UVs per month, we will lose in terms of qualification of these people. And the whole idea is actually to find a way to manage some kind of asymptotis in order to get more value. At some point we will stop growing our audience and we won't seek any further growth. But the idea that in the meantime we might be able to extract much more value for our stock of readers. That's our reasoning. To put hard figures on it, I think it will be fair to assign to us an objective of maintaining our 10 euros of CPM, but I think it will be better to push it and to actually increase the gap between general news, general information newspaper who are in the lower single digits, and versus us, we hope we will remain in the double-digit territory. Sir, I'm sorry.
Yeah, fascinating talk. I've just got two pessimistic thoughts for you. I mean, your last sort of shopping list, your wish list, of the properties a newspaper needs to survive in a modern environment, it didn't in any way trade on any special feature that newspapers have compared to any other sector. That could have been a wish list of what a university needs to do to survive in the modern environment, or what a car manufacturer needs to do. You know, we need more techies, we need to be more agile. There was nothing in it that you could trade off compared to the sectors that are taking revenue away from you. The other pessimistic thought is, I mean, I love it. I thought your analysis. So there are the aggregators of different types, and they're taking advertising revenue away from the newspaper sector. That made very good sense to me. But when I look at the different types of successful aggregators, these monsters seem to me, at the moment, to be on a growth curve. I don't see a reason why. I don't see a move that you can make that takes some advantage of newspaperness that is going to slow Google or Amazon or some of these other monster aggregators down.
Well, I don't see. Well, first of all, I don't see Google as neither as a competitor, but I don't see Google that much as a danger. I mean, the press has a complex relationship with Google because especially in France, we yell about Google, but Google brings us a lot of values because we have some online newspapers, that they depend on Google up to 40% of their traffic. Means that on one hand we will criticize Google for its power and stuff. On the other hand, we will spend huge amount of money at doing SEO and CM in order to please Google. There is another danger, though, I didn't mention that, which are the hardcore aggregators. Let me mention two of them, Business Insider or the Huffington Post. These are clever companies run by people, hard work people and smart people. But the problem is, I did the exercise one time. I took a stories by Vanity Fair. These stories, by my own assessment, must have cost something like $50,000 to report. All together, the guy spent months and months on the story and stuff. The story on the vanityfair.com generate something like 30 comments. The same story was on the Huffington Post under 300 words kind of condensate of the story, summary, and it generates 600 commentaries. Means that you have a value which is taken for free, because of course the Huffington Post story was absolutely clear on copyrights, and they mentioned the source, they link back, and so on and so forth. They were fairly clean, but they actually took the value, hijacked the value away from Vanity Fair. So there is two analyses. Either the Huffington Post people are extremely clever, which is the case, or the Vanity Fair people are a bit dumb as far as digital strategy is concerned. I'll let you draw your own conclusion. Sir?
The same argument would argue against the long tail, because if you're trying to create scarcity, other people would hijack that information, and the scarcity have no value, no different than the movie industry.
I believe that scarcity has value as long as you manage your own scarcity. I mean that if you are able to actually restrict the number of pages you are going to put your ad on, and if you are able to concentrate the incoming investment of the advertising community on the most valuable stuff, and if you decide that you won't sell to any ad networks which will resell you your stuff for less than $1 of CPM, I think you are creating some value. But you have to have unique content. That's the issue. If you make this montage with some kind of commodity news that you can find everywhere else, then it won't work. You need to preserve your uniqueness. You need to have in your media outlet some stuff that won't be available anywhere else. That's the idea.
That was my point. Huffington Post would remove some of your scarcity because they have hijacked that.
Yeah, but personally, that's an interesting question. Personally, I would prevent the Huffington Post of taking back my stories. And it doesn't work that way, because actually it was candidly told by people from the Huffington Post. They were basically explaining how it works. They are receiving calls from the New York Times saying, okay, we have this stuff, you should take it back and backlink to us. So the newspaper industry and the print, online print industry, if you will, online news industry, is actually selling itself off, you know. And I think it's a big mistake. I think we need to be much more radical than we are.
So you have a system which gathers information about people. There are strong laws in France about privacy and that sort of thing, much stronger than here.
Yeah.
To what extent is that constraining what you get to do?
Well, we are not. First of all, our lawyers are currently working around this, but we believe we are sure that we might remain in the boundaries of the French laws, because the French laws say that you can collect stuff, but you have to declare it, and you have to inform your people, your audience. And then actually you are going to collect some information. You have to detail the information that you are about to collect, and you have to give them a way to provide them a possibility to opt out of your system. So It will, and we are going to be very careful with that because we don't resell our data. We don't share them because we know that if someone subscribes to or goes to our website and actually find itself a couple of weeks, months later deluged by unwanted mail and stuff, and if they find a way to actually link this deluge to us, it will be a really killer stuff for our business. So we are going to be extremely careful with that. Sir?
I'm in the news industry like you are in Europe, and don't you think since it's so costly for us to produce news, and you give the example of the New York Times, but there will be digital-only companies that will produce unique content under the economics of the internet much more cheaper. Like models over here, Bleacher Report or SB Nation, that simply pick experts on the field.
Yeah.
Like 25 experts on the 49ers here in San Francisco, and let them report Sunday for Sunday and simply pay them into their vanity with recognition and everything, but do a much better job than any professional journalist actually could do on the 49ers.
That could be the possibility for the 49ers. That won't be a possibility for a financial investigation regarding Wall Street abuse. That won't be a possibility for covering a foreign conflict. That won't be a possibility to actually make an in-depth profile of the Tsarnaev brothers. Yeah, your model is not contradictory to mine, and actually we as a whole, we should not insulate ourselves saying we are just doing value-added news, we're ignoring the rest. And you're right in the sense that we should also consider crowdsourcing and stuff as you just mentioned. They are not contradictory as long as we keep some part of kind of cordon sanitaire about our uniqueness. I think that's a key element. Sir?
So, big picture are people working on alternate ways of funding news sources? I mean, this advertising is, I hate it.
You hate it, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'd be willing to, I mean, well.
You liked it in print and you hate it
No,
online?
I ignored it in print. Okay.
No, just to answer your question.
Does France have anything equivalent to PBS or NPR?
Yes, we do actually. We have public funded broadcast stuff. The model I'm looking more with a great deal of interest, I wrote a story about it, is ProPublica in the US. ProPublica is a very interesting model, but it has something unique that you won't find in many countries, which is philanthropy funded kind of stuff based on various syndication that will help to fund the stuff without an agenda. And I think it's pretty unique to the family trust who funded ProPublica. They basically don't have an agenda. They went to Paul Steiger, the former editor of the Wall Street Journal, and they say, Guy, we're going to fund you the first years of your operations, but you are going to do great journalism, investigative reporting, socially engaging stories, society important stories. And that's the whole envelope. For instance, in France, if we might have some billionaires willing to sustain such kind of stuff, we might have someone who might be willing to put its agenda on it. So it's a pretty unique model. But I don't believe that much that we could have publicly or funded journalism. By the way, in France, I mean, the 10% of the revenue of the actual newspaper in France is coming from public subsidies, which I think is totally dangerous. Carl.
Danger that the kind of Berlusconi Murdoch model will spread and basically take over the universe? Like, how's Berlusconi model doing in Europe?
You mean like
he's got Italy.
Yeah, well, he basically failed to do that in France. So he launched and then he closed. It was part of a major television network which lasted a few years. This guy was kind of dangerous. He had an agenda, and his TV content was extremely cheap and stuff. So
Still seems to be growing.
Murdoch is growing, but Murdoch is growing in a fairly old-fashioned way, I would say. There is no much digital property that Murdoch was successful in. I mean, the Wall Street Journal is a great newspaper, it's a great newspaper online, but it's great newspaper because it was a great newspaper, very online, very on early days.
Fox.
Yeah, Fox, yeah. Dennis?
Yeah, apropos to your comment, Hal, we had an email. I had an email from Richard Stallman, who proposed a different model. He believes, of course, that advertising is the root of all evil and probably should be eliminated, and that content should be paid for by the user. So he suggested that things be sold essentially in small units, probably not words, more like paragraphs, I think. Using a mechanism very much like Ted Nelson's trans-copyright mechanism, and that users would buy their access by paying in bitcoins. This is not an unreasonable structure in a sense, because it basically gives you access to everything at a fee which perhaps could be made very small. The logistics, of course, are somewhat significant, but not insurmountable. And it is a totally different model from what we have today. It takes the commercial side of things out totally.
Yeah.
Not certain it guarantees much else, though.
Well, I have some prevention about it for several reasons. First of all, as a citizen, I'm a bit allergic with the notion of anonymous money. That's point number one, but let's forget about it. Let's just consider the business model he suggests. We need recurrence. We need recurring models. Point number one. Point number two, we need to establish a relationship with our readers. That's a very important point. And by doing so, we might be extremely sensitive to the wave of the news cycle. Mean that we won't sell that much word, phrase, paragraph, and stuff in a slow day, slow week, slow month news cycle, but we will fare much better and on a high news cycle. So it might have two consequences. The first one is that we will be really depending on the news, which is by essence unpredictable. And the other consequences might be that some news outlet might be tempted to create their own news, which, I mean, to make things foaming, as we say in French, you know. So I think it might be a bit dangerous. Carl.
Will the Google antitrust settlement in Europe make any difference?
Sorry?
Will the Google antitrust settlement in Europe make any difference?
I don't think it does make a difference to us. Well, frankly, as long as Google is not deciding to enter original news reporting kind of stuff, it doesn't make any difference. The only thing in which Google is affecting us is the ability to act as a kind of black hole for the advertising revenue, since the search is still growing as the display is less growing, and the part of the display that Google is actually capturing is fairly significant.
We have time for one more question.
So, sorry, you didn't have an opportunity, and the lady, you will have the last word. Sir?
Oh, I have one. Okay. So, related to the topic of users disliking ads, back when web ads, and I guess they still are kind of popular, users decided, some users anyway, I don't know what percentage, decided to fight back by installing these things called ad blocking.
Ad blocking, yeah, that's right. That's the most downloaded extension of Firefox.
Yeah. But I'm wondering, did that play a role in any of the downturn of web ads, or was that even a noticeable impact in the advertising world?
It doesn't have a noticeable impact. I understand your question because as much I'm able to check it, but it doesn't have any impact. But I think it's a sign. It's a signal. I'm sorry. We should not ignore it. Miss, and I think it will be the last question.
Yeah, you talked about eliminating some advertising intermediaries.
Some of them, yeah.
But I take it those intermediaries existed in when it was print only, right? So they're ad companies and
There were
and bundlers.
much less for the print. Yeah.
So I guess what I was wondering was, with the technological tools that you were talking about, is that an opportunity, an area of opportunity for you, you know, sort of to disintermediate that relationship with advertisers? Or do you think that a lot of those intermediaries sprang up in the electronic?
Well, most of them sprung up, yeah.
Oh,
sure.
okay.
They are definitely. I mean, compared to I've been in the news business for quite a while now, and compared to the early days of the print-only business, there is much more intermediaries at this time. You have these whole people working on data, reselling remnant and advertising and stuff, and which did not exist at the print era. So that's much more fragmented market, and these intermediaries are capturing a great deal of value, I think.